I'm Emily Doyle, this is Susan, and we are going to introduce ourselves and do all that formal stuff after we've played our fun game. We want everyone, last session, we're going to try to bring the energy. This is a team game, and one person per table is the captain. That's the person with the device. That the questions are going to show up here, and you're going to try to answer those questions as a team. All right, thanks, Susan. Hopefully that was fun. We wanted to wake you all up after that brownie break. I heard about those brownies. All right, so just quickly on the agenda, we already played our trivia game, so that's set. We're gonna move on, do some quick introductions, let you know who we are, and then we'll talk a little bit about the problem of drift or class reliability and maintaining that. We're going to do some brainstorming. This will be a pretty interactive session, so I'm glad you all had the chance to meet each other and interact a little bit already in the game. You'll continue that. Susan is going to talk about progressive early assessment's approach to maintaining reliability. And then we're going to have some time to brainstorm strategies for maintaining reliability. And if there is time, you'll be able to create your own drift plan, but if not, we have materials and resources for you all to follow up with that activity. So hopefully we'll get there. So just quickly a little bit about myself. I'm Emily Doyle. I've been with Teachstone just about 7 years last week. Super class nerd. I've written a ton of blog posts on just this topic. I am reliable on every one of the 6 class age levels, and yes, that means I take 6 recertification tests a year. I'm a master coder on all those age levels, and I've also trained, and now I'm the strategic community manager for Teachstone, which means I get to make lots and lots of connections and bring people together. This is one of my favorite pictures. I'm meeting some new friends at an Alabama State conference. This is me just last January, and we're all laughing because we were discussing a blog post I've written, and I'm miming signing an autograph, although that was probably a very silly thing to do. But we had a lot of fun together meeting and talking class strategies. I'll let Susan introduce herself for a moment.
So as Emily said, I'm Susan McGraw, and I am the lead assessor for Progressive Early Assessments, and we provide assessments for a range of counties in California. Our largest county is San Diego, and San Diego has been doing the QRIS since about 2005, and I've been part of that QRIS since 2005. But I've I've done assessments the whole time. And I was trained by Bridget in 2008 on the pre-K class. So one of the very beginners of the class, San Diego got involved with it. I'm a certified observer on the pre-K, the infant and the toddler, and I'm an affiliate trainer for all 3 of those as well. So what I do is assessments and more assessments, and I have a team of about 50 assessors that do both ERS and class. And over the last few years, the stakes have gotten higher and higher for our counties, especially. San Diego gives us stipends to the teacher based on their class or ERS scores, and the director gets the stipends. And the school receives funding, or the center, the classroom receives funding based on their scores. So it's just a little bit of pressure on us to make sure that we are staying highly calibrated and reliable to all of the tools that we give assessments on. And we do like infant, toddler, pre-K, and then all the 3 ERS tools as well. So that's a little bit about who I am, and then we'll go on to some of the things that we've learned.
So I just wanted to take a minute to talk about the problem of drift. And when I talk about drift, all I mean is if you think about reliability as a course going off course a little bit, whether that means objectivity changes, whether that means you start to develop certain misconceptions that may veer a little from the manual. People tend to think that class is like riding a bike, and you can go through that training, take that assessment, and then maybe you may observe here and there throughout the year. And then what happens is they come back, study maybe a little bit, take that recertification, and fail the first one, and then call Teachstone and say, what happened? So in reality, the thing about maintaining your reliability is it's not quite like riding a bike. It's more like a practice. And the analogies we like to use are a sport. If you think about a bowler, somebody going out on the bowling lane that was a star bowler 5 years ago, they might use the term, ooh, I'm a little rusty. That definitely happens with class. If you think about somebody who's a software developer, same thing. It's really an art and it's really a practice. The more you do it, the more you expose yourself to it, the better you're gonna be and the sharper your skills will be. And it's also an art. And I think that's one of the reasons why some people are so passionate about class and about the manual itself and really interpreting it, is because it truly is an art to really understand all the nuances and become so acquainted in it. So we wanted to just take a minute to let you all have some interactions. And I'm guessing that the reason some of you came to this presentation is because you're dealing with that problem, is how do I maintain reliability and fidelity? I know it's probably more than just a yearly certification. What am I supposed to be doing in that time period? And if you're asking that question, then you probably come across some red flags in your data. Like, what's going on here? We might have a reliability issue. So we thought it might be helpful if you had maybe about 3 or 4 minutes to turn to your group and try to answer this question. Maybe just come up with 2 or 3 examples. Fill in the blank. You may have a reliability problem when. Susan will give you some great examples just to get the juices flowing and you thinking about what that might be for your situation and what you've seen. But she's experienced some things and can give you some examples.
So because of those high stakes that I spoke of about a few minutes ago, and I'm sure some of you sitting in these chairs have worn that hat many times, all of our reports are reviewed by a higher level assessor, an anchor, or a lead. And we look for these different things that are showing us that maybe we're having some drift problems or reliability problems. Like we see this in a 2-hour, 4 cycles, that we see these huge, big variations in scores, across, the dimensions. That's, at times it can be like, okay, what's going on here? Because you can sometimes see them, but when you see wide variations and there's no explanation for it, that kind of like, okay, what's going on here? And then all 7s all the time, or all 1s all the time, like you're like, really? This must be the best teacher or the worst teacher ever. And then when they have trouble recertifying, that they are out there doing those class tests or observations for you, but when it comes time for them to recertify, you get a phone call saying, Susan, hey, I'm on my 2nd attempt and I'm not passing and I'm afraid I'm not going to pass. And all of my team, probably just like all of your team, they have to stay certified or they can't be out in the field doing their assessments. So that's another really big one. And then that last one is when you have a 2-2-2, and then it jumps up to a 7, and you're like, oh, that's another thing where you're like, okay, what's going on with this assessor, or can they maybe explain to us why they could go from a 2 to a 7 in a 10-minute break. So those are some of the things that kind of pique my interest at times. So take a few minutes and think about some of the things that make you at times think, I wonder what we need to do with our team.
Katie.
That's a long walk for the mic. I do have a really loud
Do you have a loud voice?
Mel.
Okay.
We talked just a little bit about some of the variability, just given the example of what happens if you have a 2, 2, 2, and then maybe a 7. The first place I go is asking what really happened during that cycle that was a 7 or during those cycles that were a 2. And I was talking a little bit about an example I just saw where based on how the teacher was moving through her day, 3 of the cycles ended up being transitions. And then the one cycle where we actually observed free play, she did some beautiful things in free play, but the other cycles were really transitioning from breakfast, transitioning, and just the way that the 20-minute cycles fell, the variability wasn't there for those cycles. And so I always stop and ask the question first, okay, what was happening before I jump to, oh, is something happening with the assessor? It was more what happened that day, and then working backwards from there.
Right, yeah, so it may not be an assessor issue, it may be something to notice in the day.
I know I don't need that. I have a really outside voice.
Oh
and so
yes, I love that.
what happens, we do, I do observation training, and also we do refresher training, and I was talking to my group. One of the things that I know that I also do double coding with our reliable observers, and so when I go out, the first thing that I notice, if there are no high, mids, and lows, is when we go into that debrief, we don't have a basis for the conversation, because it's like, well, how'd you come up with the 7? But if you don't have high, mids, and lows, then how did you even come up with a number, right? That's the first red flag. The other thing is very recently, that same example, don't call me when you're 2 tests down. You know, call me through the first test, right? So I had a person who was 2 tests, actually, yeah, she was 2 tests down in her recertification, and we sat down, and it was simply that. So I said, well, what's happening when you're doing your scoring? Because I know you know the language, and so I mean, because you can articulate with the class language. The manual is white; it's all white. There's no highlighting. So then again, how do we come up with our scoring? Because we start on that face page, but where's the supporting documentation? So how do you know where your eyes need to go? And so, I mean, I can go on and on and on with how it flows, but the other piece of it is that we're finding that our observers are not having enough opportunity to actually get out in the field. I mean, because like a practice that you said, I mean, you use it or you lose it, right? I mean, if I lift weights one time, you know, for a few weeks, I get those muscles, right? And then what happens 2, 3 weeks later, right? Those muscles start to act, you know, whatever. And so they're not using those muscles. And so when they go back, and I know that from personal experience, that it's really hard to do the identification. And so that is reflective of the note section, right? So when we go in to have those conversations, those notes, again, are not reflected. So then I hear things like, oh, well, you know, she's doing much better than, oh, you know, she's got a lot of help. That's not the class. That's not the lens, right? That's a coaching lens. That's a supervisor lens. It's everything but a class lens. So.
Yeah, I love the analogy of the muscle building. That would be a great blog post.
Well, you said it.
I also don't need the microphone. So we talked a little bit about when you have high range scores and instructional support, but maybe no evidence to back it up, or if you have high range scores and negative climate a whole lot, that might be some personal bias being showed. It might actually be evidence of negative climate, but it could also be, you know, I just didn't like that teacher, and so, or if we find a lot of mid-range scores all the time, then maybe somebody's having a hard time deciding on the range. So they're saying, oh, it kind of happens, because they can't differentiate between the frequency, depth, and intensity. So those were some of the things we talked about here.
Great. All right. Anyone else before we move on?
So we're going to talk a couple minutes about drift, so our approach to managing drift. Once again, I'm going to talk mainly about San Diego because they're my biggest client. And this year, and we're, like I said, we're going into like 12 years of the QRIS, and so the stakes keep getting higher and higher and higher. So this year, our contract read that all assessors had to be at 85% reliability, that it wasn't the 80% that Teachstone recommended, but that they wanted our assessors to be at 85% reliability. So that I was told that at the beginning of like August. And I had been in contact with Teachstone for quite a while, but early last spring I really got into more in-depth questioning and looking at our practices. And so I was confident that we could hit those 85%. And so I had to talk to Teachstone and say, well, what do I do when somebody doesn't hit that 85% on their test? They pass with you all. Can you reset the test? And they were able to. And that's one of the things that I really want to stress for all of you is that you can reach out to Teachstone anytime that you're having problems with, your team having reliability or calibration issues, and they'll give you great solutions, because that's what I did. I just kept talking and looking and talking and calling more people and trying to figure out the best way. And all of this is online, and their blogs and resources and stuff. So because of that higher calibration that we were really getting pushed on, before we started, so we could get our muscles back out, we do our observation window from about November through June is when we basically do most of our observations. We might do some infant toddler in the fall, early fall, in the summer, but our pre-K goes from November through June. So those pre-K observers have not ridden that bike or lifted those weights since June. And I know when I haven't been in the gym in a while, my muscles hurt. So I wanted to make sure that we were ready come November and that we didn't have hurt muscles, because too many people were relying on these scores for us. So we did what a lot of you probably already have done. We contacted Teachstone. We paid for a group calibration, and we paid for the webinar with Mary Margaret, which was invaluable. And I was able to share those results with my funder and say, look, this is how well we did. And most of us scored over at the 90%, and a few people at the 80%. And those ones that scored at the 80%, we had a different solution for them. But to be able to hand that to your funder or to those people who want to know to make sure, are you doing this correctly? Being able to say, we calibrated with Teachstones, and we know, and we have these reports to give you, it helped us a lot make that funder kind of feel more confident in the scores that we were giving them. And then the other thing that we do that's really, really important to us is that on a monthly basis, usually on a Monday morning, and usually in California, we have a Monday that's a holiday, be it Veterans Day, Thanksgiving. I mean, we have all kinds of holidays. But if we can't find a holiday, we'll ask all of our assessors to clear a Monday morning for us so that we can have a monthly meeting. And we do it, I know it's cost a little bit of money to get everybody together, so we have a go-to-meeting in this free teleconference websites where everybody can call in, but it's worth the money to pay to get those people to come together. We spend about an hour and we talk about any data trends that we're seeing. Like, we'll look through our data to see if there's any trends that are popping that were unusual from last year. We'll go on to Teachstone's blogs, pull out things that were new and relevant. We'll share those before the meeting so everybody can have a chance to talk about them. We have people send in questions that they might want to have us answer during that phone call. And I'm very fortunate that I have a wide range of talent in my assessment pool. And a lot of times somebody besides myself or the other lead assessor will lead those conversations, because it brings us to a more deeper understanding. If you have to be the person that's going to present at that meeting for us, you better have all your ducks in a row. So we really, in my organization, I really promote not just myself talking or another, even though I really like to talk, or another person. We really want that team to start taking ownership and being that everybody is an expert on the class tool. Not just Susan or not just Sandy or whoever, that all of us are class experts. And then We also do quarterly calibrations that we purchase through Teachstone. My assessors have to prove that they're reliable on a quarterly basis through Teachstone. And if they choose not to buy the calibration through Teachstone, we give them the opportunity. We have a person that is a highly reliable double coder for us. She does double coding for some other organizations. I just got really lucky. She came into my little world and I snagged her. And she's a wonderful double coder. She's been double coding she does some double coding for Teachstone and for Head Starts. And so she comes into our world and did some double coding for us. And once again, we could take those results to our funder and say, we have a highly reliable, not just, because sometimes, like in your community, they say, well, oh, Susan how do we know that Susan has that, yes, she's passing her test and all of that, but sometimes when you're in the same community over year after year after year, there's a bias that gets built up against you in some ways. And so when you can bring other experts from outside of your organization to say, look at our team, is not only are we double coding against each other, but we've gone against Teachstone, but then we also have another source of evidence that we are meeting those reliability goals. And so those are some of the solutions that we've done in San Diego and used up and down the state, because I know the last thing I want to have happen to me is have a teacher or a director or my funder come to me and say, Susan, how do you know that these scores are accurate? How do I know? And I can look at them confidently and say, well, all of my team are highly reliable and calibrated, and these are the things that I do to make sure that it happens. And then I don't worry about it because there's so much at stake on these assessments. So that's what we do with PEA. So we're going to move on. Oh, I did the wrong way. We're going to do a group brainstorming for a few minutes to talk about what are some solutions that you might have for reliability in between your annual recertifications. What are some of the things that your team is doing, or maybe you're not doing anything? Maybe your grant or your funder or whoever only makes you prove reliability once a year, your certification. So what are you doing? How often are you doing it? What are some of the solutions that your team has come up with? So we'll give you a few minutes to do that, and then we'll come back together.
Susan and I walked around and heard some really wonderful strategies that people are already doing. So I want to make sure we take a few minutes to hear some of those and share those out, because everyone seems to have slightly different approaches. So I think there's a lot we can learn. Is there anyone willing to share what they talked about? Do you want the mic?
No, I can do that.
Okay.
So we actually had a question more than a comment. Are there things like, and I'm new to class, could you or do you have warm-up videos on the website? I know there's a video library you can purchase. I know there's the recertification. I know there's all that stuff. But when you were talking about team meetings, like I was thinking how cool it would be that each month when we meet, that there's just this quick, dirty warm-up that we have a calibration conversation with each other about. And it wouldn't need to be the whole extensive.
Right, just a sample. Well, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I see Megan, who's on our marketing team and manages resources on the website, writing that down. So that's a great suggestion.
I will add that there are video library samples. Most of them are about 1 minute, 30 seconds to 2 minutes long. And you can get to it by going to resources and then videos.
Okay.
There's
There's also a couple of webinars, if you look at the recorded webinars on the topic, that go through some examples.
Okay. One of the things that's really helpful is we find that there are these places where some of our observers are experiencing blind spots too, and so there's the vlogs as well, right? That are part of that. And so there's of course, there's the whole Mary Margaret and Sarah that do the whole thing with the domains, and just having. That's what I was thinking. I'm thinking, okay, we're going to do emotional support. Everyone watch that vlog, and it's like 7 minutes long, right? And let's talk about those things, because everyone thinks the thing about it is it's like, oh, emotional support, yeah, we got that down pat. No. Let's look at the places where we may be missing things, which is the thing that the blog goes over, misconceptions about the emotional support domain. And those things that, because it's easy, I mean, it's like all emotional, all instructional support. And I think we've all had that experience where other scores have gone down because we're all just focused on IS, which is not, is important, it is important, but what happens when we stop, so, okay, I got really strong arms, but like my legs are weak. All right, so the whole body needs to be well.
Yeah,
so
that's a great point. Anyone else? I'm curious, did anyone discuss double coding strategies? Because there's different ways to do it.
We double code at the indicator level, similar to what was shared earlier, low, mid, high. And the low, mid, high is not the end score. We want those to match when we double code. And we require our assessors to double code 1 in every 10 assessments per tool that they complete.
Wow.
So
when you double code, I'm curious, we talked at this table a little about the different ways that one method is that you consider everyone who is going out together a master coder, and they come to consensus together and are accountable to that evidence. Or you have a more experienced anchor or master coder, and that person's the source of truth. Is that, I see you nodding.
we still,
I was gonna say, we do use that anchor as that kind of source for truth, but it's always coming to a consensus because that we know, you're not perfect and you might miss an interaction that the other person is saying, so we do take all that data together and then create that score or that high mid low.
That's a great point, yeah.
What qualifies the anchor to be the anchor?
Yes.
the length of time that they've worked with the tool, the scores across time,
Okay.
to show that they're highly reliable on the tool, and their ability to actually verbalize and debrief in that situation. Because it's great if you can score, but in order to teach, you really have to be able to verbalize why I scored it the way that I scored it. And if I can't verbalize it that way, then it's going to hijack the conversation and it can't help kind of combat that drift.
Yeah, and I know Edie shared a little bit.
Yeah, well, we have 2 affiliate trainers, so if there are anchors that Kelly and myself are the ones that are normally looked to as a resource for that. And so now in implementing a more coaching model, I go and double code at least once each semester with our coders to be our observers. Just to kind of have that accountability, and then also to kind of open up some conversation with them before they recertify.
So this has been a really wonderful conversation. I just did a time check. We're running a little bit low, so I wanted to make sure that we had time. I know lots of folks mentioned that they use the video blogs, the blog posts, those free videos that Megan mentioned. These are really great resources, and we just want to make sure y'all know how to access them. If you go to teachstone.com/free resources, that's going to be your key to all of that stuff, and there's a specific section you can click on just for observers that will be really good resources for you as you think about how you fill out that drift issue and how you solve for that. And like Susan said, when we talked about Susan's approach and these quarterly calibrations, that was the max. That was what she could afford. That was the max. For some, it may just be twice a year. But it's really important to consider all those other free resources and getting a little creative, like as Susan talked about getting a little creative with using those resources to your benefit and having those group calls are what you need to do.
It's teachstone.com/resources.
Oh, /resources. Okay. Thanks, Megan. One other thing I just wanted to mention, I think most of you know about this, but in case you don't, every once in a while people are shocked to find out there is an email address, reliabilitysupport@teachstone.com. We've promoted that as the email address people use when they need support when they're testing. But if you have observation protocol questions, drift questions. This isn't just a test hotline. You can use this and somebody from Teachstone will contact you and really think through your question, because data is really important and it has to be accurate. So we care deeply about that. We want to work with you to find those solutions. Okay. We sadly will not have time to fill out our templates, but we thought that might be the case as we were planning this session. So we've included a handout. I hope everyone got it. As you went through this session, we hope you'll think about what your potential red flags might be and what those solutions might be. And on the back, we've just included some information on how to access those resources, as well as how to get in touch with Susan and I, should you want to get in touch with us after the session.
We have like 1 minute.
1 minute for any remaining questions. Good. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. We made it.
Last session of the day.